when I picked up the phone to ask my son, Ethan, when his wedding would be. His wife, Chloe, looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already tied the knot yesterday, Eleanor. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people? I, who for 3 years had paid their monthly rent of $1,200 for that cozy suburban home in Springfield, Illinois? I, who had bought every piece of furniture in their house, from the sectional sofa to the memory foam mattress? I, who had filled their refrigerator with groceries from Whole Foods when they had nothing to eat? I was not a special person. I stood there in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my gaze while Chloe made herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had picked out for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes, and the illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $250 on that dress, thinking about how nice I would look in Ethan's wedding photos. Photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had planned every detail. I had put money aside to give them $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diane in Chicago to tell her the good news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me after the ceremony. All of that collapsed in a second with those 4 poisoned words: only special people. Ethan finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed-sounding voice, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses. But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos on social media. I saw Chloe's parents proudly posing next to the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw Chloe's white dress, which I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a deliberate, cruel exclusion. It was a message, loud and clear. My money was welcome, but my presence was not. If you've ever felt the sting of being taken for granted, you know exactly what I mean. Do me a favor and hit that like button, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to draw a line in the sand. And don't forget to subscribe to Aunt Millie's Tales for more stories about finding your strength when you need it most. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Chloe called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the confident woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now, she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Eleanor, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice trembled slightly, as if the world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had run to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten a simple salad so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Chloe," I said with a calm that surprised even me, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was not I who was trembling, but her. "Eleanor, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies, all lies, wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings, which I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had this constant feeling of walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping to get a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, only special people, awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I had calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in those 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $33,000. $33,000 I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband, Robert, had left so I could live my last years in peace. And what was it all for? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after I hung up, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had changed. It was not just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I stood up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes as always. The same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without getting it back. But there was something else in my gaze. A hardness I didn't recognize. A determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time, I didn't think about calling Ethan to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone in anticipation of a message from him apologizing for the previous day's humiliation. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and cried silently when they treated me with indifference. Now, this table would be a witness to something completely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and started to do the math. I wanted to see in exact numbers the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $1,200 multiplied by 36 months was $43,200. Food and supplies, approximately $400 a month, was another $14,400. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, anniversary gifts, at least $5,000. Chloe's medical emergencies, $1,500. The car loan they never paid me back, $3,500. The air conditioner repair in their apartment, $700. The living room furniture, $2,000. It came out to over $60,000. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $60,000 I had wasted from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from the savings I had put aside penny by penny for decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep 2 adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang, and I saw Ethan's name on the screen. Normally, my heart would have pounded as I ran to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and explain that everything had been a misunderstanding. But this time, I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, it fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Chloe. I let it ring too. Then, a text came from Ethan. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket to buy them something they needed, the pharmacy for Chloe's medications. Today, I went for a walk just because I wanted to. I walked past the park where I had often taken Ethan as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I start to believe I had to buy my own son's affection? At the bank where I had so often made automatic transfers, I stopped in front of the door. The branch manager, Mr. Klein, saw me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every one of my transfers to Ethan and Chloe. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked directly to his office. "Mr. Klein," I told him, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed." He looked at me, surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Miller? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Ethan had shown in me in recent months. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything. And I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Ethan, Chloe, Ethan again. It was as if they had developed a radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left an enormous burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. When I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Ethan's, Chloe's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to my house and saw a scene I will never forget. Ethan was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Chloe was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. "What is happening here?" I asked in a voice that sounded louder than I expected. All 3 of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own house. Chloe was the first to speak, and her voice had that desperate urgency I had already heard on the phone. "Eleanor, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Sterling is from the law firm we consulted about your situation." "My situation?" The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised me. "What situation?" "I'm doing perfectly fine." Ethan finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child, and now only reflected financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank, and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that." Mr. Sterling, a man in his 50s in a gray suit and a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. "Mrs. Miller, I am Dr. Sterling, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went directly to my dining table and collected all my documents that he had been reviewing without my permission. "These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom?" Ethan interjected with that condescending voice he had perfected in recent years. "We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation, then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help." Chloe approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Eleanor, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent and taking control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now. Mr. Sterling interjected with that professional voice lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable. Mrs. Miller, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that came from my throat was hoarse, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like trash? Chloe jumped up as if I had slapped her. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process. There it was. The naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I had would one day belong to them. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance in advance. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you, get out of my house. Ethan stood up with that angry, childlike face he made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't? My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Sterling took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Miller, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Ethan and Chloe to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary, until you feel better. I took the folder, and without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash can. The only transition that is going to happen here is yours to the front door. Chloe started to cry, but they were tears of frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Eleanor. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I have decided that my money is better used in my own life, I am suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Ethan tried to approach me, but I took a step back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms when he had nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life financed by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said in a voice that was supposed to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Chloe was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger? It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Sterling packed his papers with the efficiency of someone who is used to having proposals rejected. Mrs. Miller, this is not over. Your family has legal options if you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems. A judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words were like a blow. I realized this was not just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. "Mr. Sterling," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, "I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who, until last week, financially supported two completely capable adults." Chloe stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. "This won't stay like this, Eleanor. We have rights, and lawyers too." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want, with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." The three of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people who are not used to being told no. Before he went out, Ethan turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Ethan," I said with deep sadness, but also with crystalline clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect." As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, but not out of sadness or regret. It was out of adrenaline from having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake in bed, planning my next steps like a general preparing for a battle. If Ethan and Chloe wanted to fight, I would give them a war. But it would be a war I would fight with intelligence, not with emotion. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Mr. Davies, a man I had met years ago when I was handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Sterling, Mr. Davies had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. "Mrs. Miller," he told me as I explained the situation, "what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation." His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had thought. "We have to document everything," Mr. Davies continued. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts." We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Davies whistled when he saw the total sum. "Mrs. Miller, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of two adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." When I left Mr. Davies's office, I had a complete plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contact. And fourth, I would start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Ethan and Chloe's apartment. "Mrs. Miller, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son?" he asked with the familiarity of a person who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. "No, Mr. Summer. This time, it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be of the best quality." He looked at me, surprised, but asked no questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son, Ethan, who installed security systems, came by. It was Providence in action. "Ethan," I told him, "I also need to install surveillance cameras. The complete system. The price is not an issue." That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't been to in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Ethan or Chloe needed something urgent. I treated myself to the full treatment: cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. When I got home that afternoon, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced for a moment, but as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked as I got out of the car. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Martha Brooks. I live next door. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices in your house, and I got worried. Is everything okay?" Her sincere concern touched me deeply. "Come in, Mrs. Brooks," I said. "I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe." While I was making coffee, I told her the whole situation. Martha listened without interrupting. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money." Her words gave me hope and confirmed that I had made the right decision. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Ethan and Chloe had money for rent, for food, for their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, the new locks and security system were installed. As they worked, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. "Eleanor, it's Chloe. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can do it at your house, cook together like we used to." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable. I called her back. "Chloe, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months, $2,400 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Eleanor. We really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she replied with surprising honesty. "Eleanor, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. "Chloe, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, you ignored me, you humiliated me, and finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me." "Eleanor, please." I cut her off. "There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine." I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. A few days later, on a Friday morning, the doorbell rang. The cameras showed a very well-dressed young woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor Miller," she said as I opened the door. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation. and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Ethan and Chloe had escalated the situation. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your ID?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She showed me an official ID. "I am social worker Ms. Jenkins. Can I come in and talk to you?" I let her in, knowing a refusal would have been worse. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "we have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Chloe's hand in the wording. "Ms. Jenkins," I said, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers use to justify their invasions. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm calling my lawyer." "You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Davies, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he came in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Ms. Jenkins," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Ms. Jenkins replied with less confidence, "we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being." "What family?" Mr. Davies asked dryly. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and checked her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money?" Mr. Davies took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. Over $60,000 that were withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client." Ms. Jenkins reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given did not match the reality she had in front of her. "Mrs. Miller," she said finally, "can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally discovered they were using me," I replied simply. "Because I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle." "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Ms. Jenkins, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore." After a few more questions about my health and ability to manage my own affairs, which I answered with perfect clarity, Ms. Jenkins closed her folder. "Mrs. Miller, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case." After she left, Mr. Davies and I remained silent for a few minutes. "Eleanor," he said finally, "this is going to continue to escalate. Ethan and Chloe are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. They are desperate." He was right. A month later, Mr. Davies came to my house with a grim expression. "Eleanor, we need to talk. Ethan and Chloe have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you. The words fell on me like stones. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs? Yes. He could place Ethan as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. I sat down heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had experienced in my life. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. What evidence could they have? They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim you have behaved erratically. They also submitted fabricated unpaid doctor's bills and medications that you supposedly hoarded without taking them. The manipulation was diabolical. We managed to get a statement from my pharmacist clarifying I had no issues, but their other witness, a hostile neighbor, was determined to paint me as crazy. The only path forward was to fight. Mr. Davies arranged for me to see a colleague, Dr. Reed, an expert in assessing mental capacity. After 2 hours of rigorous cognitive tests, she concluded, "Mrs. Miller, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent." This professional validation, while a relief, was also a sad confirmation of how far my own son was willing to go for money. The trial came 3 weeks later. In the courthouse hallway, I saw Ethan and Chloe. When our eyes met, Ethan avoided my gaze, but Chloe held it with a coldness that confirmed this was just a business transaction. Their lawyer's opening statement was a masterclass in twisting reality, portraying me as a confused old woman manipulated by strangers. Then, their witnesses. Chloe's performance on the stand was Oscar-worthy, complete with tears, but Mr. Davies's cross-examination exposed the cracks. "Mrs. Sterling, can you tell the court when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" She stammered, unable to give a single date. Ethan's testimony was just as hollow. When asked how much money he'd received, he feigned ignorance. "Does over $60,000 sound about right?" Mr. Davies pressed. "Maybe." "She's always been generous." "And how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money?" The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with the weight of 71 years of experience. I told my story, from the thousands of dollars to the humiliation of the secret wedding. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Davies asked, "why did you stop financial support?" "Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love," I replied, my voice clear and strong. "It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I, as a person, was not." After 2 hours of deliberation, the judge returned. "It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Eleanor Miller is in full possession of her mental faculties," he began. "Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights. Furthermore, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had won back my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from abuse." As we left, I saw Ethan and Chloe arguing with their lawyer. Lena gave me a look of pure hatred. Ethan looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw something that might have been regret, but it was far too late. That night, Martha and my friends threw a celebration at my house. We toasted to justice, to freedom, and to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. "Eleanor," one of them said, "today, you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated a significant portion of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Ethan and Chloe again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment, and that Chloe had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity never could: the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead, and in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Eleanor. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself.